Tuesday, April 13th. Our invocation today is led by Commissioner Meplink, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Justin Roebuck. Please rise.
Shall we pray? Our Heavenly Father, we humbly come before you this afternoon, our Lord, and we thank you for allowing us to meet as a Board of Commissioners, to meet to discuss matters concerning the citizens of Ottawa County. And Father, we pray for your blessing upon this meeting. We pray that you will bless the dialogue that takes place. We pray that you will allow us to reach good decisions, and we just pray for that. We also ask, Lord, that you'll be with our police and our fire in our county. Be with those men and women that are protecting our lives and the lives of others. And Father, we just we pray especially for them during this time with this pandemic going on. We also pray for our health department, our health workers, both those in the hospital and wherever they off doctors' offices, medical offices, etc. And we ask that you will bless them and that you will keep them safe so that they can keep us safe as well. Rid our nation, Lord, of this virus soon. We pray that is our prayer. Father, we ask that you'll be with the men and women protecting our nation, and we pray that you will keep them safe and keep their families back home safe as well. Go with us now. In your name alone we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States
of America,
and to the republic for which it
which
stands,
stands one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Garcia.
Here.
Mr. Bow. Mr. Zylster.
Here.
Mr. Dannenberg.
I am here.
Mr. Meppelink.
Here, Holland, Michigan.
And Mr. Turfred.
Here.
Mr. Holtbluer.
Here.
Mr. Dion.
Here.
Mr. Connors.
Here.
Mr. Bergman.
Here.
And Mr. Fensky.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Presentations, petitions and communications.
None from us.
I think the medical director is going to be on at our next meeting, so we'll move on to public health update. And I believe that Darrell has it today. Is that correct?
I'm here, Commissioner Bergman.
You're on.
All right. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm just going to share my screen. Commissioner Bergman, will you just confirm that you can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Very good. Okay. All right. So the last time that I presented to all of you, we were averaging about 71 cases a day. That has moved up to about 185 cases a day. And so there has been just a dramatic increase over the last month or so in the number of cases that we're seeing. We've just tipped over 27,000 cases since last March in Ottawa County. So you can see here on the figure that we are definitely in an uptrend right now and seeing a higher and elevated number of cases, which makes case investigation and catching up with people a little bit more difficult and just a strain on public health resources. But we have not reached the peak that we saw back in November. And hopefully this peak will be, or uptick will be blunted because of the impact of vaccination. When we look at the rates that we're seeing in our community, kind of looking back in September, you can see that we saw minor upticks after holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas. And we've seen through the recent increase in our case rates, we haven't had any large holidays until Easter spring break. And the impacts of both Easter and spring break are probably not yet factored in. So we'll be looking to see what kind of impact spring break has over the next week or two. So our case rate right now is ticking up toward 500 per day per million here in Ottawa County, which is quite high. When we look at our positivity, we've also reached new highs back at the turn of February to March. Our positivity rate, so the percent of tests coming back positive, were 2.9%. So one of the lowest that we've ever seen. And since then, we've now reached 20%, which is one of the highest rates, positivity rates we've seen yet. So based on the case rates and positivity, we're definitely seeing an increased and sustained transmission in our community. And we probably could use a lot more testing in our community to just shine a light to find cases so that we can catch up with them and make sure that they're isolated and catch up with contacts to make sure that they're in quarantine to prevent any further spread. When we step back and look at the county overall for the number of cases that we're seeing each week and the number of hospitalizations and the number of deaths, those are displayed here on the screen. Blue are cases, orange are hospitalizations, and the deep purple are the number of deaths that we've seen. You see here in the cases a stair-step increase each week. Last week was only a little bit higher than the week before that, but we still may be seeing cases coming in that will make those numbers look higher. And we are still waiting to see what the impact of Easter spring break will be. When we look at the number of hospitalizations that were coming in, there was a period where we had a nice lull in the number of hospitalizations, but those have started to tick up to a number that we saw early in the wave back in November. So 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we saw 34 cases, last week 26. The numbers this week are still coming in. We've also seen a handful more deaths in the last 3 weeks. So 4 weeks ago, we saw 2, 3 weeks ago, we saw 7, and 2 weeks ago, we saw 5. So we're still seeing the complications of COVID-19 and hospitalizations and deaths still manifested in the data that we have. When we look at our hospital systems, we've definitely seen an increase in the overall number of beds that are occupied, and definitely an increase in the number of beds that are occupied by COVID-19 patients over the last few days. Of all of our available beds, 20% have been occupied by COVID-19 patients that are either confirmed or suspected to have COVID-19. When we look at our ICU beds, we've definitely seen again an increase in the number of beds that are occupied by anyone who's sick, but definitely an increase in the number of beds that are occupied by COVID-19 patients. So that number over the last few days has been 30% of all ICU beds occupied by a patient with confirmed or suspected COVID-19. We still haven't reached the highs that we saw in the November wave. And I hope that we don't reach those numbers because that's definitely a point where our hospitals are in more of a stressed situation. When we look at some of the good news, we've definitely made a lot of progress with vaccination here in Ottawa County among people age 16 and older. So that's the minimum eligible age to receive any vaccine. Over 66,000 people are completely vaccinated in Ottawa County. So that's almost 29% of our population that's completely vaccinated. And I'm just really proud to see those numbers. That's definitely going to be have a big impact on preventing COVID-19 movement through our community, and it's going to protect people from hospitalization and death. When we look at those that are age 65 plus, more than 65% of folks in Ottawa County who are 65 plus are completely vaccinated. So close to 30,000 people in Ottawa County who are completely vaccinated. When we look at the state of Michigan, their number is 60%, so we're about 5 or 6 percentage points higher than the state of Michigan. And so hopefully that will help blunt any of the spread of COVID-19 in those that are 65 plus. But since this population is also very susceptible to hospitalization and death, hopefully that investment in making sure that those populations were vaccinated early on will pay dividends in reducing hospitalizations and deaths in this population in the week or two ahead. When we look at vaccination and equity, one of the core values of Ottawa County Department of Public Health is equity. So doing our best to ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity to have the best health outcomes possible. Here in Ottawa County, I just want to show the racial and ethnic distribution of folks in our community, but also folks who are receiving vaccinations in Ottawa County Department of Public Health clinics. So this is not for the entire county, only Ottawa County clinics, which usually make about a quarter to a third of all vaccinations given in Ottawa County. So the gray columns indicate the proportion of Hispanic or non-white persons in our community, age 25 plus, and that's 13%. And in Ottawa County clinics, the proportion of people that have received appointments and been given vaccination who are Hispanic or non-white is 13.4%. So we see that we're reaching the population in our community. We're approaching equity. We still have more work to do, and it'll be a continuous, there'll be lots and lots of opportunities in the future to continue to ensure that equity is provided. But this data indicates that we're reaching some of these minority populations, and that the Ottawa County Department of Public Health is hopefully upholding one of those core values of equity. All right, the last slide looks a little bit busy, but the main takeaway here is that people who are older, populations who are older, have much lower case rates of COVID-19. So these are case rates since the beginning of February through yesterday. And you can see that the case rates in this red line and this black line are those that are 65 to 74 and 75 years and older have some of the lowest case rates. And the reason for this is that that population is the most highly vaccinated at 66%. So this is just really strong evidence suggesting that the vaccine is working and protecting those older populations. And if you go down through the age groups 50 to 64, those are in their 40s, 30s, and 20s, and follow the lines, you can see that those populations with each decreasing decade also have a decreasing proportion of that population that's vaccinated. So there's this, the more vaccinated a population is, the less disease that we're seeing in the community, just a strong indicator that the vaccine is working. There's one point I want to make about this slide is that the cases that we're seeing represented here are cases in the community often who are not vaccinated. So of all of the cases represented here from all of the different age groups, 95% of them, we don't have any evidence that they've been vaccinated. So this again suggests that those who are unvaccinated are at higher risk of contracting COVID-19 in our community, and that those that are vaccinated have a shield that's protecting them from infection and symptomatic illness. So just really good news there and just encouraging information. And I want to encourage everyone who's eligible to please seek out vaccination because it is safe and effective. Lastly, I just want to do the overall takeaways. We're continuing to see community spread. Case rates are high, and our lab positivity is not just elevated, but the highest we've seen since the beginning of the pandemic. Hospital capacity is adequate, but the number of beds that are occupied by COVID-19 patients continues to increase. And it's something that we want to pay close attention to because of a lot of the work that we're doing in the community is to protect our healthcare institution, just to ensure that we can provide the care people need in our community. The age group most affected by COVID-19 right now are people aged 20 to 29, the younger of the age groups in our community. Among people age 65 plus, 66% are completely vaccinated. And among everyone, 29% are completely vaccinated. Here at the Ottawa County Department of Public Health, we are vaccinating our minority populations at about the same rate that we see them in the overall population, suggesting that we're approaching equity. And our highly vaccinated populations are showing lower COVID rates, just strongly suggesting that the vaccine is protecting people. And that's it for me.
Okay. Questions for Derek?
I guess I got one.
Okay, go ahead.
Chairman. And this is a question you maybe don't know. This is Commissioner Dannenberg, but maybe you heard in Lansing. I feel, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think Michigan has been pretty stringent on the restrictions they have put on its citizens through this whole time. And I'm going to use examples like other states. Indiana and Florida probably are less stringent on it, but yet right now, Michigan is on the news nationwide as having the most cases. So I'm a little perplexed about how this is happening. Do you guys hear anything from Lansing saying this is what's happening, that's what's happening, or?
Thank you, Commissioner Dannenberg. I can speak a little bit to that, and I'll look to Lisa to help fill in any of the blanks. Some of the things that we're seeing here in Michigan that may be a little bit different than some of the other states is definitely an increase in travel due to spring break, but also just kind of complacency or a little bit of just a lack of wanting to mask and socially distance. But one of the biggest things is that Michigan has a large number of the COVID-19 variants, which are more infectious and could be contributing to a higher number of cases and a higher incidence of cases compared to other states. Lisa, do you have anything else?
No, I think you hit it. The fatigue, I think, has really set in, and people are being a little bit more relaxed about a lot of the mitigation efforts. And so, again, it's an opportunity for us to encourage the people to really take this current surge seriously and impose some of those social distancing, masking rules on yourself. I mean, it's just so important right now. We're in this middle space where we just need to continue to vaccinate people to get us closer to where we are safe and protected. So,
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Hey, Al, this is Doc here. Just like to add something on to what Drell said. There are so far about 20, a little over 20,000 cases of the B1 variant that have been identified in the United States so far. And over 2,000 of those are right here in Michigan. So we have about 10% of the entire cases in the entire United States here. So we certainly think that that is a factor playing into this. Initially, most of those cases in the early stages were in the prison system, but now it's out into the general public. We have to remember too that we're only sequencing a small percentage of the actual positive tests out there. So the actual number is probably much, much higher than that.
Anyone else?
I have a question. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
for Darrell or for Lisa, and if it's for Lisa, then I can wait. Of those who are registered to receive a vaccination, what percentage of those are at the age of 65 and over? Would you be able to identify that? Or?
Commissioner Garcia, I just want to make sure I understand the question. Are you saying people that have an appointment but aren't necessarily or haven't necessarily gotten it yet? Yeah, I don't know exactly, but I can tell you, as Darrell mentioned, we have 66% of 65 and older that have been fully vaccinated. And we're about almost 76% who have initiated. So initiated means they've at least received one dose. So it kind of gives us an idea of how many people haven't gotten a vaccine. We've done a number of call outs in the media and to our partners throughout the community to reach that other 25% who still may be, hesitant because they have questions or because they don't have technology to sign up. So again, I'll just put it out to all of you that if you know people who desire a vaccine and they haven't been able to get an appointment yet, please feel free to have them they can contact me directly and I will make sure that they get an appointment.
So that's where I was headed. I wonder if we have reached that plateau where now we just have folks who are saying, I'm not there, or I'll never be at the point where I actually will be looking for a vaccination.
Yeah. And we wonder the same thing. But it's just there's without, interviewing and talking to that 25%, it would be very hard for us to know or have a definitive answer about why we still see 25% unvaccinated and 65 and older.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Doug, you had a question?
This is for Lisa or for Doc. I wonder if you could just kind of talk briefly about your thinking on high school, in school versus sports. I think we've seen in Ottawa County that most high schools are closing, but sports are staying open.
Boy, that is a big question, Doug. Since the beginning of this whole situation, one of our goals in Ottawa County, and I believe in the state of Michigan, has been to maintain in-person learning. We realize how important that is for not only academic purposes, but just socialization. These kids have been really struggling. We also know that sports are a part of that important socialization and, just becoming a grown-up. They learn so many lessons from that. However, we can't ignore the fact that close contact is one of the main reasons or one of the most critical factors in spreading the COVID-19. And we know that sports, especially those sports where it requires close contact, becomes a dangerous situation. And so we've seen several outbreaks among sports teams. We've had to make the unpopular decisions to put all the kids in quarantine and maybe stop holding the sports for a while. But it's just so important. We are allowing sports to continue. There's a testing requirement now that is in one of the current state's epidemic orders. We haven't really seen if that's helping to take down the number of cases because we were on spring break and we haven't done it long enough to be able to see any real impact, but we're hopeful.
So if you were to say either or, if we're going to be in school versus having sports. It seems like the calculation's been made that we can't be in school, but we can't have sports, which, people can make their own, decisions in life, but that seems to me an odd calculus.
Yeah,
Right.
I think right now, if I'm understanding you correctly, we have kids who are in school and they are in sports. Unless there is a case where it puts some of the members of the sports team in quarantine or, certainly an outbreak, which would prohibit that sport from happening.
I guess just in Holland, I'm just saying the high school is closing and the sports staying open. And I don't know if that's coming from Ottawa County Health, or is that the individual school board making that decision themselves?
Doc, do you want to take this one? Because I'm just not sure about Holland specifically. I know that on Friday, the governor did recommend a pause to sports for 2 weeks.
Right.
He also recommended a pause to school for 2 weeks or going to a hybrid model. So then it was left up to the individual district to decide because it was a recommendation. We also made the same recommendation,
Right.
but it was not a mandate.
Okay, just from what I've seen, it just seems like the school boards have kind of seen sports as safe and school is not safe, which, I'm not, you guys have more information than I do, but, I think in school is important and sports is also important, but there seems to be a calculus that, to me seems, slightly off maybe.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would agree with what Lisa said, that really we're following the governor's recommendation. That's our recommendations to the schools, both to go to remote learning for 2 weeks and to hold sports back for 2 weeks. But again, this is up to the individual school boards if they decide to follow our recommendations or not.
Okay, thank you.
One thing I want to add in recognition of that, Commissioner Zylstra, is and I was going to talk a little bit about what we're doing this week. One of the really kind of, I think, cool things that we're doing is we're targeting the 16 and 17-year-olds with vaccine clinics. And we've had a really great response. So we've partnered with both Spartan Nash and Walgreens, and we have 3 clinics scheduled for 16 and 17-year-olds using the Pfizer vaccine, because that's the only vaccine that can be administered to that age group. And we've seen lots of young people sign up. We're very hopeful that this will help to reduce the number of cases that we're seeing in that school age population, at least in the high school age category. We know that when there are fewer cases, that will reduce the number of kids that have to go into quarantine, which we know has been incredibly difficult for students and families. And so if I can just really encourage members of our community to consider vaccinating their 16 and 17-year-old, I think that's going to help with sports and academics.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, yes, Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, I got something. In light of the current surge in COVID-19 cases and pursuant to MCL 46.11K, I'd like to move that the County Department of Health presents a report to the Commission on the following. A list of.
Kyle, we aren't taking any motions. Is that, you're trying to make a motion? Is that what you said?
Correct, yeah.
We don't, it's not on our agenda. Sorry. We don't make motions on, if you want to refer it to planning and policy, you can do that.
Okay.
But we have our agenda set already today.
Before.
Sorry.
Huh.
Anyone else? If not, thank you, Lisa, Darrell, Doc. Thank you for your input today.
Commissioner Bergman, may I just add one thing before we are dismissed?
Oh,
You said no?
go ahead. Yeah.
I'm cool with that.
Okay. No, go ahead.
I did just want to mention, because this was kind of big news. Today we were notified by NDHHS that the FDA and the CDC have paused the use of Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And, just to kind of give you a little background, there have been more than 6.8 million doses of Johnson & Johnson administered in the United States. And the CDC and the FDA are constantly looking at all of the data that comes in specifically related to any adverse reaction to a vaccine, any of the vaccine. They have identified data related to 6 US cases of this, and I'm not an expert on this, but it's a rare type of blood clot occurring in individuals after they received the Johnson & Johnson. All 6 cases were in women between ages of 18 and 48, and they occurred between 16 and 13 days after they received the vaccine. It looks, awfully suspicious that there is a cause and effect there. However, the CDC and the FDA are really going to dig into this information and analyze the data and investigate this current situation. We have pulled all of our Johnson & Johnson clinics and vaccine. We've notified all of our partners and our healthcare providers, and we're confident that our federal partners will figure it all out and let us know. And until that, we're on hold. We do really want to encourage people to continue to seek vaccine, though. We have plenty of Pfizer and Moderna. If you consider what we're getting along with our partners, our hospitals and pharmacies. And so don't give up on the vaccine. Get out there and get vaccinated. It's the best thing we can do right now to move on from this difficult situation.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that too, because I think sometimes the negativity that comes from something like that causes people to question whether any of them are safe, right? And
Yep.
if you really think about the percentage is pretty small.
Yeah, well, it's one in more than 1 million.
Yeah.
If you consider 6.8 million doses and six adverse reactions.
Yeah.
So thank you for giving me the extra minute. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right, next thing on our agenda is public comment. This is one of 2 times this afternoon the public can comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment at this time? If not, do we have anyone on Zoom or?
You have one individual on Zoom,
Okay,
and you should see a message to unmute, and if you could just state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
yes,
Okay, this is Becky Mulder. My address is 1587 Rebecca Run, Hudsonville, Michigan. The message that Ottawa County has been sending in recent weeks is that it has no discretion in regards to enforcing the state's orders, in particular the MDHSS orders. The message has been that Ottawa County cares, but it simply has no choice but to go along with the state. However, as pointed out at previous meetings, that position is not supported by the language of the orders. Rather, the orders explicitly give direction to the local health departments. That discretion has even been recognized by the state. For instance, in November of 2020, Ryan Jarvie, press secretary for the Attorney General Nessel, said local authorities are best positioned to enforce the MDHSS orders. However, Jarvie went on to add, we trust these professionals to use their authority and discretion in responding to the reports of violations. So even the AG's office recognizes that local authorities have discretion in terms of enforcing the orders. Last Friday, the governor made recommendations, not orders, but recommendations to close high schools, among other things. When faced with only recommendations, the Ottawa County Health Department still chose to stand with the state. A recent MLive article indicated that the Ottawa County Department of Public Health is joining the state in recommending the closure of area high schools due to rising cases, said spokesperson. So it appears that regardless of whether the state gives orders or recommendations, the Ottawa County Health Department continues to pledge allegiance to the state to the detriment of Ottawa County residents, especially our school children. State law clearly provides that the Board of Commissioners is the governing entity of a local health department. As the governing entity, commissioners, you have oversight authority over our health department. Respectfully, commissioners, please exercise that oversight and call on the health department to exercise its discretion to scale back the contact tracing and force quarantines of our healthy school kids, to allow our healthy kids to stay in school, socialize with friends, and play their sports, rather than be isolated to the detriment of their mental and physical health. Please start standing with Ottawa County residents who elected you to represent us, not the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else?
We do have one more commenter. And again, you should see a message to unmute. And if you just want to state your name and address for the public record, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, guys. This is Sandy Benton, 2805 Judson Road, Spring Lake. Listening to the information today regarding the update on the statistics for COVID has been interesting. I'm just curious. I would like to ask if, I know you can't respond back to me, but I would ask if any of you understand what informed consent is. And I would ask why it's not given with a medical procedure like a vaccine. I keep hearing that this vaccine is safe and effective. And yet my guess is these 16-year-olds that are getting the vaccine that you call a vaccine, it's not a normal vaccine by any means, that they're not told that it's untested, experimental, and that there's no liability. That if there's an injury, they can't sue the pharmaceutical company in this case. I don't suspect that any of the patients receiving this medical procedure are receiving any of this information, in fact. And I know as a parent, I likely would not put my child in a car seat when I'm told that it's untested, experimental, and that the manufacturer has no liability. So we're going around explaining to people that this vaccine that you're calling a vaccine is safe and effective, yet we don't have a lot of safety studies. So to me, it seems like we're perpetuating this lie over and over. The CDC has a VAERS injury reporting system. It is self-reporting. So I understand that a lot of these aren't even followed up on, but this information isn't given to the people who are receiving the vaccine. According to the date of April 2nd, we have 56,869,000 adverse events reported to the VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, 2,342 deaths, 4,972 hospitalizations, 8,975 urgent care visits, 8,744 office visits, 412 anaphylaxis, 460 Bell's palsy, 502 heart attacks, 84 miscarriages, 3,145 severe allergic reactions, 321, I can't even pronounce this word, thrombocytopenia. So I'm assuming that might be some blood clotting. We're proposing that the 16 and 17-year-olds get this vaccine, which is untested, experimental, no liability. And I wonder what their mortality rate is. I bet you could tell me. It's very low. I guess in Ottawa County, I would love it if you guys would consider bringing in informed consent, making that a standard instead of following what the CDC says. The CDC says, just give this to everybody. Safe and effective, regardless of any research being done on it, that's an outward lie, and we're perpetuating that. So I expect better from my county. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Anyone else?
No, sir.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, next thing on our agenda is approval of agenda. Could I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Support. Moved and supported. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Garcia.
I vote yes.
Mr. Zylstra.
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg.
I vote yes.
Mr. Meppeling.
I vote yes.
Mr. Terpstra.
I vote yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer.
I vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung.
I vote yes.
Mr. Kyers.
I vote yes.
Mr. Bergman.
I vote yes.
And Mr. Fenske.
I vote yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Under actions and reports, consent resolutions, Mr. Fenske.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make the motion to approve consent resolutions 1 through 6.
So moved. Support.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Dannenberg.
I vote yes.
Mr. Fenske.
I vote yes.
Mr. Meppeling.
I vote yes.
Mr. Terpstra.
I vote yes.
Mr. Garcia.
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung.
I vote yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer.
I vote yes.
Mr. Zylstra.
No.
Mr. Kyers.
I vote yes.
And Mr. Bergman.
Yes. I vote yes.
Motion passes.
Next thing is public hearing. There are none. Action items from administration, Kyle, would you take one, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to approve the low bid to authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the contract with Light Load Services LLC to repave the parking lot and entrance driveway at the DHHS building, D building at James Street Complex or campus at a cost of $173,385.
Support.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
I vote yes.
Mr. Kyers,
I vote yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
I vote yes.
Vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
I vote yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer,
I vote yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
I vote yes.
and Mr. Bergman. Motion passes.
Phil, would you take the next one, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Number 2 is the 2021 Ottawa County Equalized Values, and the motion is to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the 2021 Ottawa Equalized Values and to appoint the Equalized Director to represent Ottawa County at the state equalization hearings. Support.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, I think it'd be good for our Equalization Director, Michael Galligan, just to give a brief summary.
Sure, he's been patiently sitting here. We should acknowledge that. Be sure to speak right into the microphone because it's voice activated and otherwise online. They can't necessarily hear you, okay?
Okay,
Thank you.
this meeting, as in last year, the county board sets county equalized value. The results of our studies this year, unlike last year, so no factors needed. You will be setting the county equalized value to be the same as the assessed value the local assessors came up with. After last year's factor, I strengthened our pre-audit board review procedures, and the process went very smoothly this year. Ottawa County is blessed with some very good local assessors. In fact, Ottawa County is unique in that the local assessors and the county staff all work together very well. That doesn't happen in a lot of counties. The equalization report, I have it done. It'll go to the finance committee and then to the board. That will just be for information, all the numbers and charts and graphs. But I thought you might like to know just that assessed value is going up by 6.52%, taxable by 4.43%, which is reasonably close to past years.
Any questions for Michael? Not, thank you, Michael. Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Kyers,
I vote yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer,
I vote yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Vote yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
I vote yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
I vote yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
I vote yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
I vote yes.
Mr. Fenske,
I vote yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
I vote yes.
Motion passes.
Next thing under appointments, Community Action Agency Advisory Board, Mr. Garcia. Frank.
Mr. Chairman, we have one appointment today. I'd like to make the motion to place into nomination the name of Angie Eliopoulos, and hope I didn't slaughter that too much, to select one consumer sector vacancy beginning immediately and ending December 31st, 2023.
Support.
Has been moved and supported. Justin, can we make that a roll call vote?
Yes, we certainly can.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Same sign. Thank you. All right, discussion items. First one is our annual report from Ottawa County Prosecuting Officer. You want to come up and give us your report?
Which one do I click here?
I'm going to ask you to remove your mask so that we can hear you a little more clearly. I think that's you're far enough away from any of us to.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and board. My name is Lee Fisher. For those of you who I've not met yet, and I think there's a couple maybe up here that I've not met, and for people maybe out in YouTube land, my name is Lee Fisher. I am currently the prosecuting attorney for Ottawa County. I was elected this past November and took office on January 1st of 2021. Just some brief background about myself. I've been with the Ottawa County Prosecutor's Office for the last 30 years, as of May of this year, and spent 32 total years in prosecution. I am a career prosecutor. And first of all, I just want to make sure as everybody had an opportunity to review the annual report. I know that it was already entered in as an agenda item, but just so long as everybody's on board with that. Okay. So I'm not going to go through the entire report, but what I will do is I'm going to go through the PowerPoint presentation that we have for today, which is sort of a summary version. So first of all, we start out with our mission statement, which I'm sure you've all seen. I think that's part of the annual report. This second slide is a diagram of our current office personnel and the way our office is set up. And right now, as you can see, I am the newly elected prosecutor, and the person that I've appointed as Chief Assistant Prosecutor is Sarah Matoyzik, who is present here today. She's seated in the back of the room, so I'd like to introduce her to all of you. And then Sarah is actually located out of our Holland office. She's got her office down there. Our office is split, as you know, into two offices, one in Grand Haven and one in Holland. And Sarah is the direct supervisor down in Holland. And as you can see on the chart, there are 8 attorneys down there in the Holland office. There are 5 attorneys located up in Grand Haven with me. We've got 2 office managers, one in Grand Haven, one in Holland. And then we've got our support staff that are listed as well. So overall, we have a staff of 31 people, 32 if you count, we have a new canine advocate that we got late in the year last year, goes by the name of Q. He's a court comfort dog. So actually a staff of 32 if you want to count him. Next thing I want to focus on here a little bit is we've had a number of departures from the office in 2020. Most notably, of course, is longtime prosecutor Ron France, who had been prosecutor for 30 years for the county. I was actually Ron's first attorney hire, once he became the elected prosecutor. We've also lost Juanita Bocanegra. She was just elected to the district court bench down in Holland. We're losing Gregory Babbitt, who's been with our office for 39 years, has done our appellate work for that entire time of 39 years. So that is going to be a huge loss for our office. He's retiring April 30th of this year. Last fall, John Shirley also retired. He was a longtime assistant prosecutor in the office as well. So as you can see with those departures within the last year, we have lost a combined 112 years of prosecution experience. And that leaves a very big, large hole to fill. A lot of wisdom and experience went out the door in the last year. So next I'll go on to then the people that we've hired to replace them. One of our new assistant prosecutors is Shauna Baum. Shauna is fairly new to prosecution. She's now has a couple of years experience, about 1.5 years with our office. And then prior to that, Shauna had been doing abuse neglect work out in the Ottawa County probate abuse neglect courts representing parents. So she has a great wealth of experience in child neglect and abuse cases, which we thought would be valuable to bring into our office. And she's been a really great addition to the office. And Shauna, we've had each of our assistant prosecutors write out a little something that they like about working for the office or something that's important to them in working for the office. And this is what Shauna has to say. And for those of you who don't know, Shauna is actually, she is the wife of Ottawa County Sheriff's Office Detective Sergeant Jeremy Baum, so who we work with as well. We've also hired Assistant Prosecutor John Donaldson. He is working out of our Grand Haven office right now, and he's doing general prosecution work. As you can see, John's got 8 years of prosecution experience, but in looking at that picture, he looks like he's barely out of high school. So I don't know when that picture was taken, but it's not in our office. I can tell by the background, so it must have been sometime prior. But John is a career prosecutor. He spent 8 years with the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, actually, and is quite a bit of experience. He actually started out, and when he came to us, he started out doing felonies over there, never even did misdemeanor work, came to us as a member of their homicide unit in the office. And when he came to our office, he actually had about approximately 20 active homicide cases awaiting trial on his own docket. So he comes from a very large office in Wayne County to Ottawa County, and he is very happy to be here, to say the least. And this is what John had to say. Next, we've hired another assistant prosecutor, Britta Germscheid. And Britta is originally from the Grand Rapids area, but has spent the last 14 years prosecuting cases down in Lake County, Illinois. So she's also a career prosecutor, wanted to come back home and raise her family in the West Michigan area where she's from. Britta brings quite a bit of experience to our office. I think she's had experience in just about every area of prosecution that you can have, juvenile delinquency, abuse, neglect, criminal sexual conduct cases, homicide cases, pretty much everything. So Britta brings some good experience to us. And what we're doing now, since she's been practicing in Illinois for her first 14 years, we're bringing her up to speed a little bit on Michigan law. There are some things that are a little bit different here than they were down in Illinois, but she's catching on very quickly and she's fitting right in the office, and we're really happy to have her. And this is what Britta had to say about working in the office. Another new assistant prosecutor, Katie Matlock. She just started with our office about the first of the year. Katie comes to us from the Muskegon County Prosecutor's Office, where she spent her first 4 years of her career as a prosecutor as well. And all of these people that we've hired are all people who are dedicated to serving as career prosecutors. That's their motivation. They want to be public servants and they want to serve as prosecutors. So that's very important to us. So Katie comes to us from Muskegon, and she had just gotten to the point in Muskegon where she was starting to do felony work on a regular basis. She kind of went through the progression of doing misdemeanors and maybe some juvenile court, and then up and was doing some felony work. So Katie currently lives in Muskegon, but she's also very happy to be here, and we're happy to have her. This is what Katie had to say. And last but not least of the new hires, this is Clinton Rosekoff. And Clinton also comes to us from Muskegon County, and he's been here since last summer. Muskegon County is probably not going to be very happy with us because we're taking all their good people. But
how they feel about you.
Yeah. But Clinton is doing a great job. He's fit right in. He's got about 3 years of prosecution experience right now. Still, we're working him in then from the misdemeanor level to slowly into the felony level, giving him some low-level felony type cases. What we like to have in our office is an experienced staff as possible so that people can handle the whole range of cases, from juvenile court misdemeanors all the way up through felonies. So I think Clinton's going to be a great addition as well. He seems to be working out really well so far. And this is what Clinton had to say. So with the new hires that we have traded out 112 years of prosecution experience for approximately 29 combined years of prosecution experience. So we've got some training to do, but we've got some people who are really committed to the job and are very excited to be here. And so far, so good. Everybody's doing a great job. Next, I wanted to talk about the felony misdemeanor, the overall caseload numbers just briefly. You can see that the felony caseload decreased by 4%, which really, numbers-wise, is not that big of a difference. Misdemeanor caseload decreased by 4.3%. Again, not on the overall numbers, not a big change. The juvenile caseload, which I really can't put my finger on why, but it increased by 13.2%, which is a fairly significant increase. And I really can't quite say why that has happened. But overall, when you put together the felonies, misdemeanors, and juvenile cases that we've had, there has been an overall 2.7% decrease in crime in Ottawa County, which is fairly negligible between this year and last. Next, the major felony crime categories showing significant increases. You've got drugs with quite a substantial increase there, 27.2%. Property crimes, breaking and entering, up 6.2%. Property offenses up 17.6%, and robbery up 27.3%. And I can't really ascribe why that's happening other than that maybe, a hard economy, maybe people are, stealing to make up for lost income. Maybe with the rise in drug offenses, people are stealing to buy drugs. I can't really explain what the reasons are for the increases in these categories, but you can see the numbers there of the number of cases of each one of those. Next is the major felony crime category showing decreases, and the very encouraging one to me on this panel is drunk driving. Felony drunk driving is down 11.3%, which is pretty significant number. So I'm very happy to see that, because to me, drunk driving is the #1 public safety issue that we face in law enforcement. Next, just to highlight a couple of cases that we have pending right now, homicide cases, which thankfully we don't have many of in Ottawa County. Rarely do we get homicide cases, maybe in a bad year, maybe 3 or 4, in a good year, maybe just 1, maybe 2. Right now, we've got this one pending. It's out of Holland Township. This was a gentleman who killed his mother-in-law in a hotel down there on the north side of Holland. That was back, I believe, in May of 2020. That case is still pending. Another case that we just resolved, this was actually a manslaughter case where this gentleman, Mr. Taylor, had punched a person during a dispute. Basically, pretty much a one-punch fight. The guy went down, hit his head on the cement, and died. So he was charged with manslaughter. He just recently pled guilty to that charge. And then the third one here is Mr. Perez Jaquez. He was involved in what appears to be a dispute over a sale of a gun. And during the sale of that gun, I can't go into too much of the facts, but he shot the other party involved in the transaction and killed him. So those are the pending misdemeanor cases we have from 2020. We've also got a couple of holdovers from 2019, actually, that due to COVID and so forth, we have not been able to try. So we've got, I think, 5 total homicide cases pending trial right now. Domestic violence, which is always something that people are interested in, did unfortunately have a 4.9% increase. You can see the difference in the number of cases there at the bottom, about 30 more cases than last year. And then this is Q, the dog that I talked about. You can see his little bio down there at the bottom. He was actually trained I believe he's being trained as a seeing eye dog, but because he had a problem with stairs, he flunked out of that, but he still made the grade for court comfort dog. And we had an assistant prosecutor in the office, Jake Jennison, who was willing to take Q in and be his handler. And there was some training involved in that, and there's pretty stringent training. And we also had one of our crime victims' rights advocates, Ashley Borma, agreed to be the second handler for Q. So Q is in our office every day. He's there. He puts in, same hours as Jake Jennison, because he's got to be with Jake all the time. And so that's Q. And there you can see the photo on the left-hand side is Jake Jennison and Ashley Borma from our office, with Q in the middle there. And then the photo on the right is Jake and his wife, Nikki, with Q as well. So that's all I have as far as a slideshow presentation. Just take a moment to talk about a couple of goals I have for 2021. We're going to be training some new attorneys. We got 4 who are very new to the office, and another one to hire and to replace Greg Babbitt at the end of this month. So a lot of new attorneys to get trained and plugged into the right roles and that kind of thing. Another goal is to try as many cases as we possibly can once the courts open back up again, because we have a significant backlog in cases awaiting jury trial. I think we've probably got hundreds in the district court, and then probably at least 100 or so in the circuit courts is my estimate. I don't have the actual numbers, but I know there's a whole lot of trials out there and some very significant trials awaiting trial. So we'll do the best we can to get those tried in 2021. And one other goal that I've got that we were discussing earlier today is I'm in the process of creating a restorative justice program, sort of a pilot program for Ottawa County in the juvenile court. It's something I'm very interested in doing, and it seems to be working out very well around the state with some other counties. So that's something else I'm going to be working on in 2021. So for me.
Any questions for Lee?
I do have a question.
Go ahead, Doug.
Frank, you can go first.
Ali, it's good seeing you.
You too.
Without a mask. With the loss of Juanita Bocanegra, I imagine that that was a big loss in your office, and I noticed that your 5 new hires. Are we lacking a little bit maybe in the diversity lawyer?
Yeah,
portion?
that's a good point. I can tell you that when we've opened up these positions for applications, years ago, we used to get 200. Then we started getting 100. Now they just aren't coming in the way they used to. We're getting our applicant pools are much smaller. We've had this position open now we left it open after we made our last hire. So it's been open a couple of months, and we only have 53 applicants. And there's just not a lot of minority representation there or any in what we're getting.
Okay.
There may be a few, but some of the people who may be minority just don't have the qualifications we're looking for, quite honestly. I'd love to, have somebody that could come in and represent, and we could have some diversity in the office, somebody that could speak Spanish or another language. But we're just not getting those type of applicants right now.
Okay. And that's what I figured. I just wanted to.
Right.
Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Mr. Chair. Hey, Lee, how you doing? Good. Hey, I know you, kind of looking at some of the numbers from year to year, kind of bounce around a bit. But, over the last 4 years, we've seen a kind of a pretty strong decline in overall crime stats. What do you kind of think about that when you kind of look at it?
Well, it's hard to say. I would say that they've stayed fairly steady. There has been, like you said, in total crime statistics, you're right, over the last 4 years, there has been a drop. But if you look at the actual numbers of cases, I know the percentages and the graph makes it look a little bit more drastic than it has been. After that high in 2017, I would just have to say, we've got excellent law enforcement in this county, good communication between the county governance, law enforcement, even our city police agencies and the community. And, maybe that's got something to do with it. I can't really explain. I'm not a social engineer type person.
Right,
I can't explain the reason for the drop in crime other than to say, I think we've got a great criminal justice system in this county. When you consider law enforcement, the courts, social service agencies, everybody we've got out there working, I think they're all doing a good job, and maybe that's the reason. I think people are doing an excellent job.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lee.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Lee, you said, I thought you said we may have around 100 cases out of circuit court.
I'm guessing it may be more than that. I honestly don't have a number.
Of those, the ones that were arrested for it, are they out on bail or are they in jail?
The great majority of those will be out on bail.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very high percentage. I think the jail's only got a couple hundred people in it right now. And many of those are in there for things other than awaiting trial.
Okay.
So,
Now, will we be hearing it from the courts of why there's a backlog and why we can't work through this coronavirus?
well, I think you're going to hear that from the courts, but it's not for lack of trying. I know the courts have tried every which way possible to try to get approval to have our trials and to start conducting trials and not been given permission basically by the state court administrator's office. So
Can the county commissioners just say, yeah, go ahead?
better question for Kevin, I think.
Lee, with the amount of jury trials that you're looking at, will it be an issue trying to find jurors?
I think so. And again, that's probably a good question for Kevin, because I know he addressed it at our last COVID meeting last Wednesday about jurors out there who are continuously being summoned and then being
Yeah.
called off and summoned. And I
Yeah.
think there's some frustration out there. And I don't know, I can't speak for the jurors out there, but I know some of them are probably concerned about being together in closed spaces and so forth. But
All right, we'll wait for him to reply to that question.
okay, thank you.
Thanks, Lee.
Anything
Anyone else?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next up is the Ottawa County 58th District Court Annual Report. The Honorable Bradley Knoll.
So we interact between Lee and Kevin. Good afternoon, Chairperson Bergman and other commission members. Now, this was Lee's first presentation, and he said something at the beginning. Have you had a chance to read the annual report? Now, I was at a bench bar conference a couple years ago where the judges sat on a panel who were giving advice to attorneys about what to do or what not to do in any particular situation. And the question was, when it came to me, what's something that an attorney shouldn't do when they're appearing before me for a motion hearing? And I said, well, don't embarrass me by asking me if I've read your brief. So, I won't embarrass you by asking if you've read my annual report. And this is always a good time for me because I can come up here and take credit for an excellent annual report where 99% of the work was done by my court administrator, Lori Catalino. So once again, kudos to her for what she was able to put together. If you noticed my introductory letter, you noticed that my gratitude list was a long one. 2020 was a year like no other. And how the courts dealt with it was simply amazing. Events that would otherwise be of number one significance to the court in preparing the annual report weren't this year. For example, Judge Jonas, who is my partner judge, person I came to love, who is a great mentor, a great friend, a great confidant for my 18 years on the bench, was retired. And that loss was felt by me personally and felt by the court. And also of great significance, Juanita Bocanegra was elected to this position, the first Latina elected in a countywide race. And the first 3 months that I've had working with Juanita have been an absolute delight. I'm not surprised about that at all. In fact, Juanita and I go back quite a ways. She was actually, her first job in the law was working as a legal secretary in my law office, my old law office of Ham Persinger. So we've known each other for quite a while. And so those two events in and of themselves were significant. The fact that at the end of the year, the legislature passed and the governor signed the most extensive set of amendments to our criminal procedures, really since the district court was formed over 50 years ago, would again be a very significant event. But these are what I think the newspaper called the below the fold events now, that not quite significant as what else happened in 2020. The amazing things involved with the COVID crisis. And from my perspective, it dealt with two things: the eviction diversion program and everything else. And talking about the everything else first, we were basically overnight required to redraw our maps and figure out new ways to handle things where people couldn't be coming into the building. We had to continue to conduct hearings that had to be open to the public, that required participation by people we didn't want coming in the building. So we had to learn fast the Zoom technology, coordinating that with our Polycom system for communication with jails throughout the state, and making sure that all these proceedings were open to the public in the sense that the public could access them through, what we did is tied into YouTube so that a person in real time could observe what was going on in the court. I was always a little skeptical of the whole YouTube thing, and there were some concerns about, manipulation of those particular recordings before they were deleted. But as far as I know, there are no YouTube videos out there showing me as a cat, and disappointed by that, but that remains the case. But we couldn't have done what we did, and it was basically making things up on the fly without all of the input from the county that we got. And I mentioned that in my introductory letter, the assistance of IT, HR, and just across the board was fabulous. And I don't think I've ever been more proud to be associated with Ottawa County when I could tell my employees that, all right, there's a lot of changes. You're going to be working from homes, a lot of things that you're going to need to do, but you're going to collect a full paycheck. And it wasn't something that had to be done, but it was something that was done, and it was wonderful. Thank you. The employees themselves responded in a fantastic fashion also, because we were basically stuck without any models, without any templates, and they were able to not only accept what we were suggesting, but making suggestions that we would accept. The happiest encounters I ever have with staff people is if somebody walks up to me and says, Judge, I've been thinking. And we got that a lot, and it shows what great training they have and are offered. And obviously they did a lot of training while they were working from home. So a lot of the procedures that we were able to implement were procedures that had a lot of staff input. We always get that from the management staff, but all the way down the line, people were contributing. My landlord tenant clerk, Heather Bourne, was and has been on top of that whole eviction diversion process. And like I said, my job last year was eviction diversion and everything else. Part of that is that I'm one of my side jobs is as an instructor for the Michigan Judicial Institute. I train all the judges in landlord-tenant law. So there was a lot of contact with me from Scale or from judges around the state in terms of the details, and the devil was always in the details, and we really didn't know how we were performing in the eviction diversion program, other than anecdotally, attorneys would come from other courts and say, we really like the way you guys are doing this. So we stuck with it and made it through the year, made it through the end of the eviction diversion program, and moved on to the CERA program, CERA, the COVID Emergency, I want to say Relief Act, which is very much like the eviction diversion program. It'll be going forward from here. We've just gotten it implemented in the last few weeks. It's a little broader in its scope. It'll provide more relief. It still means tested, but it will provide for rental payments going back further and forward further. There's a requirement that a person has been negatively affected by the pandemic, but that's defined broadly enough that it would appear that all the people who are applying are going to be able to get that sort of relief. And it's not something that the court could do on its own. Legal Aid of Western Michigan has done terrific work with us. Good Samaritan Center, who has the checkbook here in Ottawa County, has done a great job of getting these applications through as quickly as possible, which is really good because a year ago, the landlords and their attorneys were gathering their pitchforks and torches because we weren't allowing any evictions to take place. And these people were facing financial crisis just like their renters were. So that we could implement this program that has generally 100% approval from the landlords and their attorneys has been a great thing. And I submitted a report earlier at the request of Commissioner Zylstra to the Housing Commission that goes in greater detail discussing the eviction diversion program. And again, I won't ask if you've read it, but there are copies available, and Lori linked that particular report to the annual report to give you more of detail about how we pulled that off. But my final recommendation involving that was that the COVID crisis will pass at some point, but the housing crisis will still be here. When I drove to the commission meeting today, I passed, as I usually do, the tent city that's on the corner of Chicago Drive and Clover in Holland. It's been there for, I don't know, at least since last winter. That housing is still an Ottawa County problem. And one thing I've learned in our district court, where we have a lot of wonderful programs. We've got 4 sobriety treatment courts. We've got a mental health court. We're associated with Allegan County's Regional Veterans Treatment Court. Circuit Court maintains treatment courts. So what I've learned from all of this is that, and my mantra has been, it all starts with a roof. There's very little we can do as part of our goal to assist people and prevent recidivism by assistance without starting with a safe and stable place to live. And it's in conjunction with that Paul Sachs and others with the county are going forward looking at the possibilities of a local Ottawa County eviction diversion program that will be a permanent feature of our court system. We're obviously in the very early stages of finding out more about that, but it's something that I'm hoping we can shepherd along in the coming months, so that when the EDP program succeeded by the CERA program ends, that we will have our own Ottawa County eviction diversion program. Other courts and counties have employed it with good results from the judges that I've talked to, and I think Ottawa County has the resources to put something like that together as some sort of collaborative effort with the nonprofits and the county, and hopefully with some corporate or foundational infusion of the assistance that we need. Excuse me, I think that's about it. And my voice is giving out anyhow. So are there any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to, number one, just say congratulations, Judge. Deputy Clerk Bourne is not here as well, but for your award from the City of Holland for the Social Justice Awards on the EDP program. And kind of thank you for your support for the Housing Commission's work on that as well. Just a couple of quick questions about the annual report. If you could kind of talk about our prison commitment rates. The 19.9 that the annual report shows, that historically is pretty high for us, right?
The prison commitment rates?
Right.
Historically, Ottawa County has been the lowest in the state. Judges come and go. That changes. Sentencing guidelines come and go. Are you asking for my comment on that? Oh, thank you so much.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Are you asking for my comment as to?
Well, yeah, I mean, in 2016, we showed like 6.6, which I thought, at that time was way better than the state. Now we're looking at 19.9, which is, kind of higher than the state average. And we look at straddles where we're doing even worse. So yeah, definitely, if you have a comment as to why, we're now higher than the state average, and 4 years ago, we were at 6.6, right?
Well, I think that you might have to ask Kevin that. I have not sent anyone to prison yet.
Okay. I understand that district court's not sending folks to prison per se, but I understand it's in your report. So I thought I'd ask you. Maybe I can ask Kevin that as well. Would you like me to ask Kevin that, or?
Doug, if I had a certain empirical evidence right in front of me, I could say X judge has an average sentence of this, Y judge has an average sentence of this.
Sure.
I don't have that information.
Okay.
Well, I would be speculating, and I don't want to speculate on the record regarding that. I can say that the package of bills that has recently been passed and became effective in the last couple of months is designed, if there's an overarching goal here, it's to lock up the dangerous people and not the others.
Right.
And there's all sorts of ways that can be implemented, but I don't think the change in prison commitment is based on any deliberate policy of a judge or a prosecutor. It's just the way things have been falling the last few years.
Okay. Now, do you think that that those reforms will affect the commitment rate, or is that just we don't know? It's going to be personnel dependent.
It will have an impact. I don't know exactly what, and I'm not as familiar with those reforms as they relate to circuit court actions as opposed to what we're doing in the district court. But certainly in terms of our bond procedures, our probation violation procedures, we've added a third way of starting criminal cases now. We traditionally had appearance tickets and complaints and warrants from the prosecutor. Now we're also going to be dealing with complaints and summons from the prosecutor. So it's a whole new world that we're going to be dealing with. And a year from now, hopefully I'll be reporting to success. That's the best I can give you right now.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Your Honor. Just a second question, and you can tell me if I'm up the wrong tree again here, but the JAWS and the CSW numbers, in 2020, we saw, only less than 11,000 hours of community service, whereas, just 4 years ago, we were at 36,000.
COVID.
That's all COVID, or do you think that there's a change in philosophy there?
I'm not aware of any change of philosophy moving away from that. We use community service both as for lack of a better word, a punishment, but we also use it as an alternative to collecting financial obligations for people who can't afford that.
Right.
The JAWS program, Jail Alternative Work Service, is normally a punishment imposed as a low-level sanction for probation violations, but we weren't able to maintain JAWS crews during the COVID crisis, and the people who we normally rely on to provide opportunities for community service were naturally reluctant to have new people coming into their buildings to do that community service. So I would expect that there'll be some bounce back this year, and that will be returning to the pre-2020 numbers by 2022.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate that, Your Honor. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Not? Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Next up is Ottawa County 20th Circuit and Probate Courts 2020 Annual Report. Mr. Bowling. Who's up first, you or John?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you again for giving us a chance to share some of our thoughts from the circuit and probate court vantage point. I don't always have this honor because dockets usually take control, but Judge Van Allsburg's trial settled earlier today. And I think all of you know our Chief Circuit Judge John Van Allsburg, and perhaps I ought to give him an opportunity first to answer the question that came up about the jurors and whether there are some concerns there. Simply because as Chief Judge, one of his duties is to review all of the jurors and to deal with all of the excuses that come through for those kind of service.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity. I do receive all the requests to be deferred or excused from jury duty, and many of those are granted. As you may or may not know, we had great plans to renew jury trials this month until the numbers started going up. We were in phase 3 back in February, and then midway through March, we suddenly dropped back to phase 2 because of the county-wide numbers. And around the 1st of April, we went back to phase 1. As you may know, phases 1 through 4 are based on a return to normal operations that was adopted by the Michigan Supreme Court. And we are subject to the supervisory control of the Supreme Court. So when the Supreme Court enters an administrative order saying we're going to follow phases 1 through 4, that's mandatory for all courts throughout the state. And so once we fell back into phase 2, we had to suddenly look at postponing our April jury trials. We actually petitioned the Supreme Court, which is the administrative, or the state court administrator's office, which is the administrative arm of the Supreme Court, and asked for permission to go ahead and conduct socially distanced jury trials that we had scheduled for the month of April. And the no we got was the final. There's no appeal from that. So we canceled our jury trials. And then after we notified our jurors, the jury pool that we had planned on calling for trials this week was the same pool that we had called for jury trials last November and had to cancel them then. So that whole jury pool, at least the ones that I hadn't approved for deferral or excusal, had been deferred now twice. And so rather than defer them again to be called back either this summer or early next fall for another round of trials, I wrote a letter to all of our jurors in that particular jury pool, the one that had been scheduled for November and scheduled again this month, and said, you've gone through this now twice, been called, you've arranged your lives to participate in jury duty, and now you've been canceled yet again for reasons beyond our control. So I said, we're not going to call you back again. We're going to put you back into the countywide jury pool. You may get drawn again to serve as a juror in the future, or you may not, but you won't be called again this year unless you really want to serve and you let us know that you want to be deferred instead of just being put back in the jury pool. I haven't heard from anyone yet on that. So we're going to be calling a whole new jury pool. We've got jury trials scheduled in May yet, although they may be canceled depending on where the countywide numbers go with respect to the pandemic. But because we are subject to the Supreme Court's administrative orders, if we're in phase 1 as we are now, we won't be holding any jury trials until we move beyond that. So we're just, we're at the mercy of the countywide transmission numbers and where that leads us. So any questions about that? If not, I'm more than happy to turn the annual report back over to Kevin. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Judge. Again, good afternoon, everyone. It's as I was thinking about coming and joining you today, finally in person, I've been watching your meetings online for quite a while now. It dawned on me that this is the 18th time I've been able to come in front of you and provide an annual report for the circuit court. So, I really do have a privilege of working with a remarkable group of people. And I was thinking about that as Judge Canal was talking about the great staff and the judges that he has to work with. And I think we find that same to be true in the circuit court and the probate court. This past year was quite a difficult one in a lot of ways. It started as a normal year. We made it through the first quarter. One of the major things that occurred in our court in that first quarter was another long-term retirement that had come up. Many of you knew Sandy Metcalf, who had been our juvenile court director and had worked with the courts for over 40 years and retired, and that created quite a transition that we had to go through. But we weren't even through grieving that or establishing, new people in new positions yet before the pandemic hit. And I couldn't help when I found this picture of the World Theater where it said the world is temporarily closed. That's what it felt like to many of us. It was just a shutdown overnight. And we were trying to figure out how we were going to continue to conduct business. I liked Judge Canal's characterization of it in terms of how he talked about we pivoted and we kept going. The reality is a lot of trial courts, not just in Michigan, but across the country, just closed. They shut down and did not offer a lot of services at the beginning of the pandemic. We made a conscious choice to not do that. And we kept going. We went to virtual proceedings right away. We had already experimented with remote work options with our friend of the court staff, and we were able to build on that experience and spread it throughout the rest of our operations. We did have some limited jury trials when we were able to conduct them. And then there was the regular kind of business that we had to focus on, like small things like trying to make sure we had a good case management system operating. And we've been working with county officials and fiscal services and IT and county administration on that throughout most of the year. So the work that we were doing did not stop. We had to figure out ways to keep going. And what I did as a result of that was to poll a lot of our judges, our managers, our frontline court staff, and I tried to use the annual report this year to tell a story and to give you a number of stories. And I realize you all have a copy of it. Hopefully one of the things I encouraged to all of our staff was that even if they weren't ready to read the whole thing, just read the chief judge's introduction letter. And I think that that would spur you on to want to dig into other parts of the report that might interest you. If any of you are driven by statistics and you like the numbers and the budget figures and performance measures, it's all in there. You can find more than you could ever imagine. And when your imagination starts thinking you want to have more, there are links to the Supreme Court website where they have, for full transparency, public-facing pages of our performance measures where we are stacked up in our operations against courts throughout the state of Michigan. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. And what I'll do is just try to highlight a few things. From a staffing standpoint, one of the things that we had to deal with right at the beginning of the pandemic is figuring out, are our employees essential or not? And the decision that we came to pretty quickly is that all of our employees were essential. And a number of them kept working in the courthouses throughout the pandemic, while a number went home and we tried to set up remote working options, but we don't always have that option. In the circuit court operation, you know, that also includes our juvenile court and our juvenile detention center as one example, where we have over 30, 35 staff members in there that are working different shifts. They can't do that work remotely. You have to be on site. And we didn't close down the detention center. We kept it operating. So we went through a lot of changes. And one of the things that I learned in a very direct way in this time is that courts don't operate well without good leadership. And we are fortunate here, and I would have said this even if Judge Van Allsburg wasn't here, but we're very fortunate to have a group of collegial judges in the state or in the county that work well together. They talk to each other, they collaborate with each other, they're willing to try new things, and they're willing to take on new assignments. You know, nobody liked the change, the kind of change we had in 2020, but everyone adapted and we figured out ways to keep moving forward. We also have a great group of court administration folks that are on my leadership team. Tom Laddig is our new juvenile court director. Many of you have met. Janelle Challa has been with us for many years as the friend of the court. Susan Franklin is our trial division director, and Johanna Wallace is our new probate register. They not only have their individual divisions to operate and staff to oversee, but they also work as a team with me to look at policy setting for the court, making sure that we're meeting the judge's needs, that we're providing outstanding public service, and that we're cranking through the work as carefully as we can. And one of the ways that we do that is to focus on our strategic planning process. That really drives what we're doing. And even now, I thought about this as Lee was talking about the goals for this next year for the prosecutor's office. A lot of ours are being reset right now as we're working on revising our strategic plan for the next few years. But we have a mission that drives a lot of what we do. And the amazing thing to me, after we've beat this drum for many years, is that most of our judges and most of our court staff can recite this for you if you walk up and ask them about it. And I know Judge Van Allsburg can because he's recited it to me before. But to administer justice and restore wholeness in a manner that inspires public trust is what we're about. That's the core of who we are and what we do. And we see that played out in a lot of the numbers that I'm going to touch on quickly as we go through here, and programs that we have that are made available to a large part because of the support that we receive from the County Board of Commissioners. We couldn't do it without your assistance and partnership in this. When you look at some of the different parts of our court and caseload trends, because of COVID, there were a lot of downtrends this year. Our overall filings went down, and both on the circuit side and the probate side that you can see here. But an interesting thing that I'd point out to you that I put in the report, and in fact that Judge Van Allsburg pointed out to me when we were comparing some notes on this, the National Center for State Courts recently did some survey work with a number of states to try to find out what the overall impact was going to be of COVID. And they started naming things that they're calling things like shadow cases or surge cases that are going to come. So our numbers were down this year, but they're expecting, based on research that they're doing in a number of states around the country, that we're going to see surges coming up over the next couple of years. We can't predict exactly what that's going to look like yet, but there are a lot of people that were not able to get their court work, their legal needs taken care of during the pandemic for lots of different reasons. And that business hasn't gone away. It's still going to come back to us. So it's a question of, are we going to be prepared for that? Are we going to be nimble enough again to rework our resources and put them where we need them most to be able to handle those caseloads? And I think Lee touched on one area in particular with the trials. We've got a lot of jury trials that have to be conducted. So we're going to be focusing some resources in that area as we go forward. In addition to the work that the judges are doing on all of these cases, we also are fortunate to have a cadre of attorney referees, quasi-judicial officers, if you will, that help the judges in handling different types of cases, often preliminary cases or portions of cases that then would eventually go to a judge later. And as you can see on the screen, there's a variety of things from divorce to child support, parenting time, abuse, neglect, juvenile cases that the referees work with. And in any given year, they're used to handling 3,000 to 4,000 of these cases. We're down a little bit this year, but they're still providing quite a bit of assistance. Something that we also try to do when we're looking at providing service in a manner that inspires public trust is to give people what they need when they're trying to come in and navigate the court system. Those of us that live there and work there every day, it's like old home week when we go into the courtroom. It's not something that we're concerned about, scared about, but for a lot of the public that perhaps don't go into court on any regular basis, it's a frightening experience. It can be very intimidating for folks. And something that I think you ought to be proud of having here in Ottawa County is a legal self-help center. It's not a mandated service. It's not something that you'll find in every county in the state of Michigan, but we have it here, and we have it so that people that need help trying to figure out how to navigate the court system can go and talk to somebody. They can at least get some help getting the right forms, finding out what it's going to cost. We can't give legal advice, but there's a lot of procedural information that we can give and that we should give. And this is one of the ways that we're able to help people out. Another area that I think about when with court-wide initiatives, we not just stayed away from shutting down our case processing during the year, but there were a lot of other things that we did. I had to suddenly, go to meetings with Al every week for a while. And,
Is that good or bad?
It didn't quite feel like a life sentence, but we started all of these COVID response meetings. We had to come up with policies. We had to come up with plans. And while we were doing it on a countywide basis, I was also working internally with the judges and the court staff doing the same thing and coordinating with the Supreme Court. It took an enormous amount of time to work through that. As I mentioned earlier, we're working through our strategic plan, where we've got conversations going on about the Family Justice Center, the MyFile or e-filing project that our esteemed county clerk has been working side by side with us on throughout this whole process. There are a lot of different things that we've been working through during the past year, and none of that got put on hold. We had to keep moving forward as we were doing it. A few other highlights that came up in our divisions, our recovery court continues to serve as one of 8 mentor courts in the United States. So out of the entire country, Judge Canal had talked about the different problem-solving courts or recovery courts that we have in Ottawa County. And all of them have been distinguished in different ways. We were fortunate enough to be selected as a mentor court and work with other recovery court programs around the country. We thought our felony collections work was going to take a complete nosedive, frankly, in 2020. Between the economic crisis that had popped up, people losing jobs, getting laid off, having all kinds of other problems, and yet the staff pivoted, went home, worked remotely, and continued following up with people on their court obligations and collected not quite $1 million. Usually we try to get over that $1 million mark each year, but I thought they did a fabulous job. We quickly worked with the county facilities department and we set up COVID-safe jury courtrooms. You can see from the photos, some of the screenings. I think some of you have walked through the courthouses and seen the different adjustments that have been made. We pivoted to new virtual technology and different platforms that we're using. And as I mentioned earlier, we continue to maintain a lot of our essential staff in the courthouses so they could continue to support the judges, even if they are conducting remote or virtual hearings. Our friend of the court didn't go away during this time period. We still had families to serve. We still had kids that we had to collect child support for. Frankly, I was astonished when I started pulling the numbers together for this report, because not only did we have over 10,000 active child support cases in this year, we ended up, I want to get the number right, we collected over $42 million in child support, which is the single largest number that we've collected in the history of Ottawa County. And that was in the middle of a pandemic. So we were able to get the child support that was court ordered, paid in most cases, and get it to the families and ultimately to the kids who needed that support. And I think that's incredible. From a cost-effective standpoint, I know you have to look at that. It's one of the performance measures that we have to meet federal standards with our friend of the court office. We had a cost-effective rate of $8.85 for every $1 spent. Not our best year, but given everything, it was significantly good from our standpoint there. We also had a number of changes with the remote work solutions that has been talked about already. We also moved to some online dispute resolution, which is not a new movement, but new to Midwest right now, where we're providing opportunities for people to connect with us remotely and work out disputes before they even end up in the courtroom or filing things there. So that's an important highlight. When we change gears and look at our juvenile court a little bit, we're always looking at ways to improve community protection, accountability,
And key for the kids that we have coming into the courts is competency development. How do we help them grow? How do we help them learn and develop skills and work with them on that? Doing that remotely, a lot of the kids that we work with had a lot of challenges with school this year. It was difficult when they were moved home and didn't have that ability to interact. We even had that in our own Juvenile Justice Institute. But we continued to persevere with them. We worked with them. We found creative outlets. And again, that goes back to the great staff that we have that are willing to do whatever needs to be done to provide good support to the kids that we have. We continued our Juvenile Justice Institute educational programming. We not only pivoted to remote or virtual court hearings, but we were able to do that with treatment services as well. Many of you heard about the telemed that has been going on in our community and across the state. Well, we used some of those same features with the treatment services that we provide for kids and families, and it worked out very well. And we did start some new programming. Unfortunately, when we got into this Evolution Youth Project and some parenting classes and culinary skills, our teachers came down with COVID. So we had to send them home and get them all squared away and isolate everyone. And luckily, though, we never had that happen in our juvenile detention center. We went through the entire COVID year so far. We've got very stringent protocols in place, and we're only operating at about 50% capacity, but we've managed to keep the detention center operating without a single COVID case, either among staff or among the kids. And that's not just Ottawa County kids. You might recall that we also have entered into bed rental contracts with 30 other counties where they don't have any facilities, and we take them in. But even with those kids, one of the things that we had to do this year was to say, you got to have a negative COVID test before you come here. And then even if you have a negative COVID test, we still quarantine them for 2 weeks before they go into the general population. But doing things like that made it possible for us to continue to have the program operating, to provide the services that are essential in these situations, and to still generate over $1.2 million of revenue for the county as well doing that. Our probate court continues to have a record number of open cases that they're dealing with, over 14,000 cases. And this is with only 6 people that are handling these. Over 1,000 new petitions filed this year. They spent time updating and improving the website to make it easier for clients. We were the one probate court in the state of Michigan that's been identified by the Supreme Court as a model for e-filing, in part because of the great work that was done on the circuit side, and we brought that over and have applied that on the probate side as well. And we also had a major transition at the end of 2019. Our longtime probate register, Penny DeWitt, retired after 35 years with the county. So making a transition and having Johanna Wallace step into that position has been great. We've continued to achieve the SCAO performance measures that are available to you online if you want to look at those. And, we're always watching for how we can help people. And, with probate issues, we sometimes lose track of the fact that family feuds can pop up from time to time. And we have to be very careful about helping monitor finances and conservator accounts just to make sure that there's no problems. And we do that on a daily basis. So we've, I think my intent in going through a lot of these examples in a few minutes is to just give you a sense of some of the highlights. The stories tell more of the background in the annual report itself. I encourage you to take a look at it, but also welcome any questions that you have about anything that's in the presentation or in the report itself, either for me or if you have additional questions for Judge Van Allsburg.
Yes, Mr. Dannenberg.
Yeah, Kevin, I'll make the story a little short. I had a closing schedule in the afternoon, and it had to deal with an LLC. And we didn't quite, the title company didn't like the documents that we got from the seller.
Okay.
I called Judge Engel, and he helped me, sent me to a lady, Miss Wallace, and she helped me immensely. So she followed up with an email, made sure I had the documentation and everything. So I want you to at least thank her for the help that she gave me. So, and we did close that afternoon. So appreciate it.
I'm always gratified to hear those stories. And like I said earlier, you know, a lot of what we're able to do, it just doesn't happen organically. It's because we've got fabulous staff that are willing to step up and do whatever needs to be done. And we try to provide them the training and the tools to do that.
Anyone else? Anyone on Zoom? If not,
Commissioner
thank you.
Zylstra, I think, has his hand up on Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, Kevin, how you doing?
Well, how are you, Commissioner?
I'm doing great, thanks. Hey, a couple of questions. Just want to follow up with the question that I had for Judge Knoll on the prison commitment rates. If you can kind of talk to that a little bit, you know, why we've gone from maybe 6.6 and 4 years ago and we're almost approaching 20 now.
Well, I've got to try to think about the best way to answer this.
Sure.
A couple of the things that have changed in that time period could certainly be the types of cases that law enforcement acts on and then brings to the court. So oftentimes when you look at prison commitment and judges have to make that difficult decision about whether somebody has committed an egregious enough offense to do prison time. And I kind of smiled when Judge Knoll sidestepped that one. I thought that was brilliant on his part because in district court with misdemeanor cases, you're looking at typically sentences that could go up to a year. And they would often be served in county jail facilities. On the felony side, when those cases come to the circuit court, now you're looking at penalties that exceed a year and could go into the Department of Corrections, the Michigan Department of Corrections, or a prison system. So, when we look at that commitment rate, Judge Knoll was right on target, Commissioner Zylstra, when he indicated that for years, we've had either the lowest or one of the lowest rates in the state of Michigan, under 10% for many, many years. Couple of things have changed in that time. Like I said, it could be the case types that are coming in. There might be some more egregious cases, or the facts will often drive the sentencing. The only other factor that I can think of in that time period would be that we have also had some changes in judges. So that can also have an effect where you might have a different judicial philosophy that is looking at how to handle a particular set of facts, or whether to agree with the Department of Corrections pre-sentence investigation report, where they're typically recommending a sentence based on sentencing guidelines for felony cases. So there are a number of different factors. I haven't done an analysis of that, but if it's something that you'd like us to look into, I'd be more than happy to take a look at that and to see if there's any particular feature that.
Yeah, I actually would, because I mean, we looked at two different numbers, the JAWS number, and that makes a lot of sense. When Judge Knoll says that, that's a lot of COVID, we go from 30,000 hours down to 10,000 hours, and, we can't find folks to, go into places, and we can't find places to have folks. So that made sense to me. But I think, if we could spend some time on that number, because it does seem from 6 to 20, that seems like, was a threefold jump. So I definitely would appreciate that. Second question is, when you talk about the legal self-help and kind of the online model that we've established,
Yes.
How successful do you think that is as far as going forward and post-COVID? I mean, we don't really have the legal self-help office here in Holland. And if that would be a model, maybe that, could be operated down here, outside of Grand Haven.
Well, that's a great question, Commissioner. And frankly, one of the things that we've learned from our COVID experience is how to work remotely.
Right.
So in effect, even though we don't have a physical office operating in Holland, anyone from any place in the county by phone, by text, or by email can contact the self-help center. And we can provide some assistance. It may not be face-to-face, but it can be done either in a virtual meeting room or by phone or by email exchanges. So I think that's something that we can provide right now, and we're doing it. The sad thing that I'll mention to all of you is that when COVID hit, we lost all of our volunteers. Most of them were retired. They were in higher risk categories, and they had concerns about coming in and continuing to work. So we're in our self-help center operation itself. It's operated by 1.5 employees. We've got 1 full-time, 1 part-time, and then the rest we had been handling with volunteers since we started the program a little over 10 years ago. So I'm hoping that we'll get some of our volunteers back and we'll be able to continue that moving forward. But we certainly have found that to be very helpful. And I think the folks have appreciated that. The one other piece of feedback that I'll mention, there are times because, and Judge Van Allsburg might have a comment on this, our legal self-help center in Grand Haven, where the physical office is on the 2nd floor, which is a lot of our family division cases are handled there. When the judges or the referees run into a problem with self-represented litigants and they don't have the right paperwork, they're not quite sure what to do. In the past, that always required us to just adjourn the hearing and have to reset it, and people have to get time off work. They've got to find a parking place. They got to find a babysitter. They've got to come back again. Now, often what the judges will do is say, why don't you just take a few minutes, walk down to the self-help center, see if they can work through this with you. The judges can go on to another case and then have the people come back. They don't have to leave the building. They don't have to miss more time from work or anything along those lines. And we found that to be incredibly helpful for a lot of folks that are coming in. So I would really like to get to the point where we've got a physical office in all 4 of the courthouses.
Right.
And have those kind of services available.
Yeah, I think we'd all like that. In the meantime, this may be an option.
Right. So ideally, that would be where we would go. It's just a matter of, getting the right resources together and hopefully developing some more volunteer support as we go forward. So if any of you know of anyone that really likes courts and would like to find a meaningful volunteer experience, let me know.
All right. Anyone else?
Roger.
Yes.
Mr. Bowling, regarding the discussion about the prison commitment rate.
Yes, sir.
I know that that's been discussed in our Community Correction Advisory Council quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the staff, as well as some of the judges, had kind of indicated that sometimes the drunk driving kind of drives that. So someone who enters into a drunk driving situation, quite often it's not their first, it's not their second, it's not their third. It could be a 4th or a 5th. And so that
or a 7th
5th,
or 8th or 9th.
right, that 5th or 6th one then triggers an elevation in doing time outside of a local jail.
Yes.
And that's where I think maybe some of those stacked up, and maybe perhaps actually a number of them, were adjudicated on high numbers of drunk driving and wound up going to prison. That's just a thought.
You could be absolutely right, but I will dig into that and I'll get some answers and report back to you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Judge. Next thing on our agenda is report by the county administrator.
Yeah, we've been at it a while today, so I just have a few brief things. First, I did want to confirm that we still have not received any direction from the U.S. Department of Treasury for the Recovery Act money, the $57 million that is supposedly coming to Ottawa County. So obviously, we're on the lookout for that. And once we have those regulations, that will trigger a process where we figure out what exactly we're going to do with that. Also, I'd mentioned that a couple seasons have started, not as exciting as a baseball season, but our budget season is in full swing, and also health management plan season. So you'll recall that last year we did not do biometrics. This year we are doing the full plan with proper precautions. And so that is underway at this time. I did volunteer last week. I know some of you have done the same at our COVID clinic at the Civic Center in Holland. It was an interesting afternoon, and it was a smooth running operation, and just it was good to interact with people and just see how relieved and how happy a lot of people are to get that second shot. And so it was a good afternoon. Also, one last thing would just be that the governor's or the MIOSHA order actually runs out tomorrow. And so I guess we're anticipating that there will be some sort of press conference or some sort of information that we get before end of business tomorrow. And obviously the part that's of greatest interest to me, at least, is what happens with the stay at home, having as many people work from home as can. That part of the order will be interesting to see if that's modified, or if it runs out, or if the recent uptick extends it, or what happens there. So, we're keeping our eye on that. Looks like it won't be today, but maybe tomorrow we should have more information on that. So that's it for today.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, Al.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Good. Hey, just going through the administrative rule, the 28, and it looks like we're doing a really good job adding a lot of health personnel. Yes. 1, 2, like almost 20 spots. One thing that we talked about today in the vaccine call is our communications department is doing a great job, but there's just so much incoming for the communications that maybe one thought was to add to the communications aspect as well. And I don't know if there's any thought to that.
Actually, there has been, and Lisa has talked to me about that. So we are working on that as well.
Yeah, it'd be great. I just think, if folks have questions on the vaccine with the J&J news, obviously we'll be here for a while, right? And, people are just that much more reluctant. And so, yeah, if we can spend some time on and some money in the communication side, I think that'd be really helpful.
Anyone else? If not, general information, comments, and meetings attended. Anyone?
Roger?
Yes.
At Allendale Chamber luncheon a couple weeks ago, Mr. DeYoung and Mr. Kyers and myself attended that, and they had a program that I thought that all three thought was pretty significant. It was called Gentle Response, and it was conflict de-escalation training workshops, and it's taught by a couple law enforcement officers, one that worked for the city of Grand Rapids, and they had different means and ways of just to deal with folks when they get escalated, and how to not feed into that behavior, and to keep yourself safe and to keep others safe too. So I'll be providing that information to Al. Phil and Greg, please add. I thought it was a most interesting workshop, and I thought that maybe that be something that we could maybe take a look at for ourselves.
extremely informative. It was a good presentation, and I agree with Commissioner Finsky that something that we should take a look at.
Anyone else?
Chair, I just got something for putting something on the agenda. You said planning and policy. This is the second time now. Is it Greg or is it Al that sets the Greg?
Give it to Greg or Al, either one.
Okay.
Or Regina. But, yeah.
Okay. 'Cause I went through that process on the last one. I was told it was going to be on the agenda and it wasn't. So it's just playing games and kind of.
Well, you can ask if they want to put it on the agenda.
I did, and the answer was yes, and then it wasn't. So it's just, I can go through the process again.
Okay, all right. All right. So many of us have been discouraged by what's happening in our county, state, and perhaps even in our county. The first thing was a country, state, and perhaps even our county. So I'm going to read the following statement, and afterwards, the statement will be on our county website. The Asian American community has experienced a disturbing acceleration in anti-Asian violence, racism, and discrimination. Asian Americans have increasingly been targeted in senseless and violent acts of verbal and physical assault and are subjected to discrimination that undermines their value and sense of belonging. This behavior is racist, demeaning, frightening, and unsafe to those who must endure it. On behalf of the Board of Commissioners and Ottawa County Government, we abhor this behavior. We stand in unity with our Asian American residents, neighbors, and friends and call for an end to these destructive acts. Ottawa County endeavors through its vision of where you belong to be the place where we all know that they belong regardless of their racial and other differences. Thank you. The next thing on our agenda is public comment. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment?
Not online, sir.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Comments or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?